Let me ask you something. When you think of something, do you think in words or do you think in pictures? It's a very important question to ask yourself, and then when you admit it to yourself how this works, and then we can start to work with this through this video. Because we don't think in words. When I ask you to think of something like your front door or your house or your workplace or a family member or friend, whatever it is, if you really do it, well, you realize a picture shows up in the mind. Now, I talk about the education system that is sort of failing to teach humanity about their own true nature, about the fact that they are conscious awareness, a conscious power inside a body. Now, most people live through their senses, and that's the problem right there. Because if we live through our senses alone, we can only accept what we see and experience through the senses. However, you can think, and then a picture shows up in the mind. Where does that picture show up? Now, you might point at your brain, but if it was in the brain quite literally, well, you would be able to find it if you cut open the brain. Now, you could try this out, and I suggest you don't, but you won't find pictures there. It's like a surgeon once said, I've cut open many bodies, but I have yet to find the mind. I've yet to find anyone's thoughts. Now, of course, there's a lot of processes going on inside the brain in order to create these experiences that we're having right now as a human being, in the human form, so to speak. Because again, if you go to sleep at night, it's like you're into a totally different world. It's like the true virtual reality. They want to try to create virtual reality? Well, imagine being able to go lucid inside your own consciousness and experiencing whatever the hell you want. You can be anything you want to be and experience it just like you are experiencing this current lifetime in this human form that you took upon you and the name that you were given. Now, you are not your name and you're also not your body, but we're raised and trained to just assume that we are. Okay, so you think in pictures. Now, in order to make sure that this helps you out a bit, let us go back to when we were born. Because when we were born, we didn't yet have a conscious mind. We have a conscious and subconscious mind. That's what they tell you in psychology. Well, when you were born, your conscious mind wasn't developed yet. You only had the subconscious mind to go about it. Now, what happens? Well, the people that you're surrounded by, your parents and their friends, everyone around you, starts telling you stuff about who you are. And you start to believe it right then and there. You develop a sort of self-image, as we would call it. Now, what is the self-image teaching you? Well, it's already training you to live from the outside in. This means you're trained to let the outside world control your inner world from birth already. Because as a child, you didn't have the option to just say, no, I don't want this, I don't agree with this, I don't think I want this. But as adults, we start to do that. So with this information right now, you have the ability to reject it. Or you can accept it. If you were a baby, I could talk to you about this and you would just accept it and think this is the truth, the only truth, because you didn't have the ability to reject it. The problem here is we are rejecting the wrong stuff. We are constantly rejecting the truth when it is hitting us, when it is trying to show itself to you, because it doesn't fit in with the picture the way society is trained to function. Now, since you think in pictures, let me ask you, what does your mind look like? Well, odds are you can't explain. I couldn't really explain you what the mind looks like. But here's a picture. I'll draw it out for you. It was created originally by Thurman Fleet. Now you see a large circle in the middle. Well, the top half says the conscious mind. In the middle we'll put a line there. And then underneath it we say the subconscious mind. Then we go down a bit, we see another line connecting to a little circle, which is called the body. The line sticking out from this circle called the body are your limbs. It's your arms and legs. Now, of course, that's not the way you look like in reality. I mean, our bodies are totally different the way they look, but this is representative of how the conscious and subconscious minds influence the functionings of the body, which is, as I said in a previous video before, it's like the temple that we are using to operate with, to operate through. Our awareness, our consciousness is operating through this form called the human body. Okay? Now, what happened as we were born? Well, that's what I tried to explain earlier. You didn't have the conscious mind yet, so let's remove the top half of the circle now, and you are only left with the subconscious mind. Now you can see here, the lines going right towards the subconscious mind, and above it says information coming in as a newborn baby. developing a self-image about who you are and what you can do. Well, that is how it went for all of us. It went for you this way, and it went for me that way. Now, this is just representative of how we are actually built into this matrix called reality, and we are sort of imprisoned inside of this world of illusions, because even science would call this reality an illusion of some sort. Even Einstein talked about it. Well, it's true, because this is not the only reality that exists. So assuming that causes us to believe in illusions, because everything here is temporary by nature, so how can it be reality? It doesn't even have a permanent basis at all. Yet we are searching for a permanent basis inside of the universe. You know, the actual depth of the universe. But that is a bit too deep for this video, so I'll digress, but this is how it happened. This picture says a lot, because you have to imagine those arrows are, for example, things your parents told you, or that you saw on television, or that, you know, friends of the family told you. I mean, as a child, you're literally left open to all the impressions other people give you. So what are they giving you? What did they teach you? Well, it's sad but true, most people are not taught anything about their minds, because the parents or society at large in general doesn't even study the mind, so they can't teach you, they can't give you what they don't have. So in this case, what we're doing is putting new information inside of our minds so that we look at life in a different way, because there are many ways of looking at life, but it's this programming that happened at birth that causes us to look at life in a certain way and only from that angle, and we never consider different angles that we can use in order to approach our own life or the universe itself. So you have to ask yourself that as well. Am I open to new ideas? Well, if you're listening to this, probably you are, because otherwise you wouldn't even bother. But this, you can clearly see most people are not open to new ideas, so they only filter information according to what society taught them, and anything that is not in line with how the masses operate suddenly is dismissed or not even looked at, because it just, they can't handle it. They literally cannot handle new information about their own consciousness and the power that they possess. But that is what I'm trying to teach humanity. That's what I'm trying to teach you, that you have a lot more potential than you realize. I keep saying this. People can mock me for that, think it's stupid. If this was the truth, they would teach it in school, Renil. It would be on the news. It would be everywhere. No, it would not be the case. Because if this happens to too many people at once, the whole system would collapse and you free yourself from the matrix in which we are now stuck. So now that we've kind of discussed how it happens when we are born, where the fact is our subconscious mind is wide open and being influenced by everyone around us and the whole world together, well, now let's put the picture back together. And we have the conscious mind again, but this time on top of this conscious mind, let's put 5 lines. And these lines represent your 5 senses. Again, this is very important, so stay with me here. Now these 5 senses are, of course, you can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Now what are they doing? They're influencing your conscious mind, because most people just operate only through the senses. They only operate according to what they can actually observe and experience through the senses. So this is why when we go to sleep at night, we totally disregard the dream world. So many people do. They don't even question it. They don't wonder, did I really go somewhere? Is that actually possible that my consciousness actually went somewhere else? Because over there you experience stuff through spiritual senses, you could say. I mean, the experience was still the same as we are living our current reality. That's why I was once inspired to write, you know, the consciousness of the universe became aware through this body, but then it became hypnotized by the very thing it observed. That is what happens to all of us. Now, the problem here is, again, we let the senses control our conscious mind. However, what can the conscious mind actually do if we exercise it? Well, we have mental faculties. So in spite of these sensory factors that try to dominate your whole mind constantly, you can also use something called imagination. You have a willpower, you have a memory, you have perception, reason, and intuition. Now, how much do you know about these mental faculties? Because again, this isn't taught in school, you know. So you can ask people, hey, have you been using your imagination as of late? And they might think, that's stupid. Who uses the imagination? They're only little children, right? Well, wait a minute. everything that you are using right now in the physical world is an expression of imagination. The computer, the phone, the movies, the series, the games, whatever you are doing, the clothes you're even wearing, the house you're living in, it's all constructs of imagination. It's made by people who actually exercise that imagination, and they were probably adults while they were doing it. So is it really a childish thing to use the imagination? No, I don't think so. But we usually just assume, well, imagination, it's kind of weird. Now we have to realize this is the world we live in, a world of imagination, and you can exercise it at will. It is through the imagination that you experience your inner body. Your spiritual body that I talk about is the body of imagination. There's something called a universal imagination and human imagination. Well, the human imagination is pretty slow. What I mean by that is that if you imagine something right now, it takes time. If you have to build plans, you have to become inspired properly, you have to do stuff over a certain period of time. And when I talk about going into the inner world and instantly fulfilling all your desires, well, I'm literally talking about entering into the world of universal imagination where you become lucid and can instantly manifest. There is no time or space in reality there. You go beyond time and space through this power of imagination. If you put the body to sleep so the sensory factors stop interfering, well, you enter into your full conscious powers. That's what we're getting at here. While the other mental faculties are the will, speaks for itself. It helps you to concentrate. So we want to learn to concentrate on stuff that is other than the sensory factors are telling us. That it doesn't mean we go oblivious and act like total morons and walk in front of cars, but it should mean that we have the ability to imagine whatever we want and let it dominate our consciousness instead of all the limitations we observe, because it's the imaginary image that will ultimately bring renewed hope to your own consciousness, to your soul. You would feel hope for yourself and your future. But we got to exercise our willpower to stay focused on that hope and not let ourselves be dissuaded again by the outside world or by what the society has taught us or what the masses are telling you. Like, oh my god, everything is going bad. Yeah, I can observe stuff is going bad in my world. Doesn't mean I have to obey it though. I can still follow my imagination. Now the memory speaks for itself as well. It's like you can remember, you can think back of stuff, but it's important to realize memory, again, is a construct of imagination. Ultimately, all these faculties are all tied together to imagination. Because if you think back about something, again, you see pictures. But not necessarily pictures, you can also experience emotions. Like you can think back of a bad situation, you might not exactly see the situation in your mind, but you suddenly feel bad about it. Something bad happened. Well, we want to learn to use our memory to only think and remember the good stuff and as little of the bad stuff, because of course that's only making life worse if we're stuck in bad patterns. Now the perception is also a very important faculty, the way we look at things. Well, we're going to get into that through lectures over time anyway, because the way we look at stuff is ultimately very, very a sort of determining factor to whether we think it's going to set us free or not. So if I only use my sensory factors to decide what is true and what isn't, I'll always be locked into this world alone. But I can move my perception into different dimensions. Again, that is what your imagination is doing. I told you, all these faculties are tied into the imagination. The imagination is a divine aspect of consciousness. Whether you want to believe that or not, whether that sounds a bit too dramatic, but it's, in my opinion, it's true. Now you have your reasoning factor. Well, I find it really funny they call it reasoning factor, you can reason it out. So I like to say we build reasons why stuff can't be done. We use this reasoning factor to build reasons why we can never do anything or have anything, or why we shouldn't do this, or why that is not realistic, why this is not possible, why this is stupid. We create reasons with that reasoning factor, just playing games just by the name of it alone. But we have to really think about that one as well. Like, I can think anything I want to think, which is a huge responsibility, and most people don't want to think. You can really measure this out. Are you one of them? I hope not, but you might know people who would rather not think. So what are they doing? They want to be zombies that don't function. They are just like infinite awareness hanging around in a body that they don't want to really use. They don't want to exercise their inherent universal power of consciousness. But that's most likely because they were never taught how it works or what it actually means to be inside this body. So they have totally identified themselves with the body alone, see all of its limitations, and then it's like, oh man, I don't want to think about this. So, and they, in their ignorance, they're trying to escape all of it, maybe through drugs or other means. Some commit suicide because they can't stand these negative patterns that are going on inside their minds. But there is still hope for everyone. You can change it. Now, the intuition is pretty interesting. The only way I can describe intuition is like you picking up ideas, concepts, information that seems to come out of the ether of the universe. Well, that is usually how it goes with my writing. I can set a question, for example. I can write a question down on paper, and then I start to write according to the question. I let the words flow to me. Sometimes when I look at them and I share them with friends, they're like, well, that's very spiritual stuff. And I realize that's not really the language I would normally use in my daily life when communicating with people. But still, there it is. I let my intuition sort of guide the way to the answer to the question that I have. So if people ask me questions concerning their own potential, I can do the same thing. I can just ask the universe inside me, can you tell me the answer to this? And then the answers come. It's a pretty mysterious faculty, but we all have heard of it, I'm sure, and it's a real thing. Now again, if we go to this picture, in the left bottom corner I said we either live through our senses or we live through our mental faculties. Now, this is the trap that we're facing. We're trained to live through the senses alone. We are not taught about our mental faculties. Literally nowhere are we taught about them. So we're not aware that we have these mental faculties that we can use instead of the senses alone. So where are people working from? Yeah, they are going through the sensory impressions alone. They don't realize, wait a minute. Yes, I see this limitation right now, but I can also imagine the solution inside my consciousness if I wanted to. No, instead what we do is we see the problem and we get upset over the problem. We want to fight this physical problem. We want to push against it because that is what our senses is telling us. And we're trained to live through the senses alone. But at the right top corner, or not the exact top, but at the right side of this picture, I said everything you want starts inside. This means everything you ever want starts inside the mind, in your own consciousness. That's where your desires originate from. Now, ultimately, the most important part is the bottom right corner where it says our actions cause our reactions, which in other words causes the results of our lives. Now, what is influencing our actions? Well, what is influencing the actions of your life is how you are using your conscious and subconscious mind, obviously, but then take it a bit further. What really influences your life and the way you act is your sensory factors. You constantly react to everything around you instead of building pictures and visions and concepts in the mind through your mental faculties that you can execute instead. So if a situation is bad, you can always imagine a better way of living and then dedicate your time through your willpower on acting on this construct that you created through the imagination. Now, this might be a lot of information for you to take in all at once, but if you really go back over this information a couple of times throughout the upcoming days, weeks, months, for the rest of your life, I would suggest, because that's what I'm doing, what starts to make a lot of freaking sense. Because the way to learn something is to repeat it. We don't learn it instantly. We have to go over certain things over and over until it finally sticks inside our minds and we finally see the bigger picture. That's what I'm trying to do here for you, is to raise your level of awareness, because that is what awakening is all about. We want to overcome the trap of the senses, and I'm not the only one that talks about this, that knows about this, but the majority of people really don't know about it, sadly. So I made it my job to at least share it for those that want to listen. It's all right. If people don't want to listen, it's okay too. They have the right to reject it. But hey, I just took it upon me to just keep sharing what I actually know instead of holding it back, because I've known about this for quite some time, and I mean many years by now, and I usually don't talk about it with anyone because people get so confused at first, because it really is like a shock to their minds. It's like, I'm expressing ideas here that they might really have never considered, and it's so different than the way they were raised. They almost immediately want to just reject it because surely this should have been taught, right? If this is so powerful, then surely the news would talk about it. In school they would talk about it. There's the great conspiracy right there. The news only focuses you on the sensory factors. The news only talks about what's going on inside the physical world. They don't talk about the imaginary worlds of the mind. So they keep you locked into how the world is through the experience of your senses alone. And school is teaching you to do the exact same thing, because they teach you to get a job, which is a thing of this world, of the outside world. So they keep you focused there as well. Maybe if you really start listening carefully to these videos, you start to see what I'm trying to get at. This information is left out for probably a reason, and maybe not by the teachers in school or the people that work at news stations, but some people higher up. The ones that really control how things are set up in any country. And if they are ignorant of this information, then I guess we can't blame them for not teaching us this. But if they were not ignorant, well then, stuff gets really spooky, isn't it? Because then it means that somewhere down the line people might have known about this information and they didn't want you to know about it. But I'll digress, because otherwise I'll go into conspiracy theory talks for now. So anyways, I hope you consider this information and consider it well, because it can ultimately change your life dramatically. And I can't even explain how much it would change, but it would help you out a lot. And it would help you understand yourself a lot better. It would help you understand what you actually are. Not just your body, not your name. There's a lot more going on to you, and this picture is hopefully helping you see these aspects more clearly that exist within yourself right at this very moment.